Man City are expected to bolster their defensive options in the summer. They've already strengthened in January with Abdulkadir Kuzunov and Vitor Reis coming in, two very young, highly rated centre backs. Juma Bar's another actually who's could
Yeah.
be integrated potentially in the summer. He remains to be seen. He's currently on loan with Lens in France. Now, our City could look to recruit another centre back in the summer. It seems as if signing at least one new fullback will be high on the agenda for Sporting Director Hugo Viana. It's widely expected, isn't it, that Kyle Walker will leave permanently. He's currently on
Yeah.
loan at AC Milan. So, that'll leave City light in the right back department. So, would you argue that right back's, really high up on City's priority list for the summer?
I feel it's both sides, if I'm being honest. I don't think it's just a right back. Right back's essential. I think Kyle Walker was the best defensive fullback in world football, and probably Manchester City's greatest ever right back, probably the Premier League's greatest ever right back. And as much as Nunes has done a decent job at right back, he still looks like a midfielder playing at right back, and there's lots of question marks fairly around the physicality and suitability of Rico Lewis for that role long term. So I think City absolutely 100% have to sign a right back. Kanji played there in the treble season a little bit, but that seems to be dead in the water, that idea. He's getting a bit older too and he's injury prone. So we have to. There's a few names, obviously Andrea Cambiasso at Juventus seems to be almost nailed on for the summer potentially. There were a lot of rumours that was basically done as a summer deal. Obviously it's not signed or anything like that, but they sort of agreed a price that would be a summer price, but wouldn't pay the January premium to bring him in, which would have been 5 to 10 million extra. So I think that he's 25, Italian international, lots of experience at one of the biggest clubs in world football, Champions League experience, of course. Very versatile, can play on the left, can play on the right. I think he's normally right-footed, I think, isn't he? But I think Guardiola would love a player like that who's so comfortable progressing the ball up the pitch. He'd be great on that side, and yeah, I think it's such a Guardiola signing. Cambiasso played in pretty much. He can contribute pretty much all over the pitch essentially, so he would be a very obvious option there. And I also do feel like City need a left back, if I'm being honest, as well, because Nathan Ake is very injury prone these days. I don't think there's any guarantee Ake is here next season. I think he will be, but I don't think there's any guarantee he's going to be fully available an awful lot, which essentially just leaves Josko Vardy out, unless Guardiola really does want to lean in on the Nico O'Reilly left back thing, which I'm not convinced that is going to be a permanent solution. It could be, I might be wrong there, but something tells me there's a sort of twist in that story somewhere. So it could leave City needing another fullback, and I'd really like to see City just for variety's sake, have a traditional overlapping fullback, because we are in that intense running period of football where everyone is, a physicality monster. And I think City, as good as we have been over the years, we've had a lot of inverted fullbacks or whatever. But I definitely think we could do with a bit of versatility, so we can get forward and go wide of the wingers and make Jeremy Doku and Savino's life a damn sight easier, so they're not constantly trying to beat two or three people. If Imagine how much easier it'd be for Doku or Savino or Oscar Bob, whoever's going to play there, if you had someone out wide of them. And that leads me to, some very obvious names. A decent option could be Anthony Robertson. Anthony Robinson at Fulham. He's got better and better and better, and he's actually number one in the Premier League statistically at the moment as a fullback. Like no one puts in more crosses or does more sprints or overlaps more than Anthony Robinson, and he's been absolutely excellent for Fulham for a long time, but got better, and he's sort of reaching his peak now. He'd be a really good option, or you could go for the current hot thing, which is Milos Kerkez at Bournemouth, an absolute sprint machine. He looks like a young Andrew Robertson, basically, sort of a regen of him. Very similar hustle and bustle approach, but I think it's fair to say Bournemouth would not be the side they are without people like him. Iriola clearly trusts him. I think it's him and Hewson who had the most touches on the ball for the Bournemouth side. So a very technically competent player, but one trusted with a lot of responsibility and a near ever present as well. He plays more or less every single minute for Bournemouth. Relentless energy, and in this modern pace and power football era, someone like Kirkaz who could just get forward and overlap and give Doku an easier time once again, or Marmoush the license to get more central would be excellent. Somebody who can cross a ball when you've got Erling Haaland, who's 6'5" and is starved of good crosses, especially if De Bruyne is getting on a little bit. I would love to see that. I would love to see a traditional overlapping fullback, just for versatility. Vardiel is great, but he's not going to do that and get a crossing. Uh, that's not the extent of it. If you want versatility, it's like Tino Livramento, probably a pipe dream because of the money it costs to get him from Newcastle. But he can play left back. He did it in the Carabao Cup final and shut down. Mohamed Salah, the first time Salah, I think in his career, had not had a shot or a chance creation in 90 minutes of his career. And that was Tino Livramento, right back, playing at left back, who's had a reasonably injury prone season. Yeah, he would be brilliant because he's technically good, all the energy. I would just love to see someone like that, at Manchester City. If you want an easy solution for now, if you want to spend 100 million on Balaba and Florian Wirtz, Ola Reina is available on a free transfer. 28 years old, loads of experience, a nomadic career, of course, with Torino and Fulham and Chelsea and now Forest. But he'd be good for a year or two if you wanted to, get a really solid right back end. I think no one's had more interceptions in the Premier League than he has actually at right back. So another very physically capable, but also technically capable player. And there's a few more names, I had on my list the other day. Jeremy Frimpong, he's more of a right wing back if we're being honest, but you know, he's an attacking option if you want, if you want to play uh three of the defenders sitting back and let him get forward, he'd overlap really nicely, score goals, ex-City Academy lad, of course. He'd be home and club trained given his Manchester City history. I really like Jeremy Frimpong. I think he's a cracking player. And then maybe something like sort of a more of a well, left field, more right field, literally. Maybe someone like Daniel Munoz at Crystal Palace, who's had a really good season as well. He's very aggressive getting forward, gets shots off as well for a right back, which is, he'd be a sort of a bit of a random punt given he's 28 years old, but he's been cracking. He's been great for Oliver Glasner. So those kind of names I think, would do a pretty good job at Manchester City.
Yeah, lots of names there, lots of good names. In terms of right backs, of course, Walker has been a fantastic servant for City. In his prime, he was known for his electric speed, his athleticism, his strength. He was rarely injured, kept himself in great physical condition. How difficult is it going to be for City to replace a player like that? And can City or should City look to sign a player with sort of similar characteristics to him to play at right back?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be looking for that aggressively because this season, there's been so many issues with the physicality and the availability of some of these players. It's been well documented that City have had an absurd amount of injuries, and Guardiola has said, and I can't remember the exact quotes, but he's implied that they're going to sit down and have serious discussions with players who can't be available and just say, that's essentially not good enough. We need players who are going to be there and going to be available, regardless of how much they love them. And that immediately turns your mind to people like John Stones and maybe Ake. And if they're not available, they're not footballers for Manchester City Football Club. So people like Kyle Walker, they're brilliant footballers, but they're also there and they were ever present and they play more or less every minute if you need them to. And I think that is, with this current calendar of games, that is essential. So it has to be people who can do that, which maybe rules out people like Tino Livramento who are prone to injuries, but then rules in someone like Anthony Robinson, who's just a physical machine, on the left, of course. But yeah, it has to be something they consider. And I do think they have to be strong, they have to be fast, because that's the way football is trending, unfortunately. I say unfortunately, because it implies maybe a lack of technical ability, but I do think it's possible to find both. I think you've got to look at someone like Kusanov, for example, who's come in 21 years old, lightning quick, physically a monster, but so comfortable on the ball. So it can be done with a keen eye and a little bit of common sense.
Yeah, and in terms of left back as well, if City were to sign a new left back, do you think that would be someone to rival Josko Gvardiol for first team place, or even potentially replace him with Gvardiol, then moving into centre back more? Do you see that? I mean, he's been so effective as this sort of marauding left back. Do you think Guardiola will move away from that and move him back into maybe a centre back role, or do you think they'll just look to sign a left back who can rival Gvardiol for that spot?
Yeah, I don't really see him as a centre back for City for some reason. Like, I think Guardiola doesn't see that either. And to be honest, I don't think he is. I mean, I know he played really well and he is nominally there, but I don't think he's aggressive enough as a centre back for the Premier League. Something tells me that he's not quite as assertive as someone like Ruben Diaz or whatever defensively. I think he's a cracking player. Don't get me wrong, Oscar Guardiola, but I can see why Guardiola prefers him. Um, Slightly more advanced, getting forward and contributing because he's technically brilliant and he's such a complete footballer. But I think Guardiola, if he was going to play him centrally, I think he would have done it by now. And I don't know, it just doesn't feel like he sees him that way. And I'm inclined to agree, actually, personally. So I think you carry on playing left back, and I think whoever would come in would be an option. But I'm not scared of rotation. I think a lot of people go, well, we've already got a left back, so we don't need one. But I think at Manchester City, they're very best, a few years back or whatever, there is always someone rotating with someone. Kyle Walker didn't start the Champions League final. We're talking about a great step at right back because Akanji got informed and played there instead, or John Stones did shifts as right back, inverting in midfield. We've got people like Danilo coming out this week talking about how great Guardiola was, but he only lasted a season because Kyle Walker was there. Cancelo came in instead. You do need that competition because it pushes people to be the best version of themselves. And yeah, I think someone like Anthony Robertson or Milos Kerkez, they're very different takes in Guardiola's left back role, and you do need variety. Not every game is going to be the same, and I think it's fair to say, as good as Josko Guardiola is, he's not had a great few months. He's made a lot of mistakes that contributed to chances for other sides. He's given goals away at times, and he's great going forward, but he could have done with someone that you could rotate in. Absolutely. And I think it's fair to say with Ake not there, Guardiola is not going to trust. Ake would have played more minutes. He was available at left back, but he's not going to trust Nico O'Reilly. But I guarantee if Anthony Robinson was there, he 100% would have played him a little bit more at left back if Guardiola was struggling, because that's an experienced, trusted Premier League player who get forward and can do the running. And Guardiola's talked an awful lot about his realization that you have to be able to run these days. You have to be able to be available and consistent. So I feel it would be an option and a rotation, and essentially whoever's got the shirt should deserve it kind of situation. Trust them. Trust them both to do the very best, but trust them to challenge each other and bring something different to the side. And I think that's the best way City can sort of move forward is with options tactically, different options basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier then lots of names, possible right backs and left backs City could target. If you were to maybe pick one from each side, right back and left back for City, who would you think is the ideal choices?
I think Andre Cambiasso is an absolute cert because he can play either side, and it's very Manchester City. And I think Guardiola would probably use him as a right back, even though he plays a little bit left back for Juve. I think he still would use him at right back, sort of inverted Cancelo there. But I do feel like someone like him would be perfect, very versatile, tactically adept. I would love someone like Tino Livramento, but I don't think that would happen. Milos Kerkez would be great, a traditional overlapping fullback. I'd take either. No, I know you asked me two, but it'd be fine with Cambiasso than one of Anthony Robertson. I'd probably say Kirk over Robinson just because he's younger, 21 years old, and I feel like that's more of something to build there with Guardiola. Because I've looked at like Liverpool's fullbacks for years and gone, oh, we've had creative geniuses in defence with Cancelo, where they've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, but we've not had a Robertson who get forward and just whipping across the big man. And we could have someone like Kirkes who could do that. That'd be brilliant. So Kirkes for me, or Livramento, and definitely Cambiasso. So two of those three.